we go. Pam is in the emergency room because she's got what's that called? Where you're spinning
Vertigo.
vertigo.
Oh, there we
Yeah,
go. Yeah.
yeah. So she's got vertigo. So she just wrote that, and then we'll see if there's some other people who couldn't join. So we'll just record it and send it out to them on the cloud when we're done. Yeah,
All right.
looks good. Okay, we can get going. Let's see. Oh, Dominic's here. All right. Bam. Let's get him in. Hello, Dominic.
Hello there, how are you? It's good to see you, Dan.
Good to see you. We're trying to figure out, this is going to be my first time voting in the Canadian elections, and then we have a
All right,
provincial.
okay.
So I'm trying to figure out the rules, but on top of that, one of the parties just quit like last week. So they were to the left of the Conservatives, and then they were going to team with the Conservatives. But then they just stopped and just the guy quit. And now all these people who printed signs and were running for election may not or not participate, but they have to join another party. And then now the NDPs are doing something, and I'm like, okay, what do I do? I don't know what to do. I mean, I'm just learning the rules, let alone the politics, between this whole thing.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, it is. And then, of course, I get to go down and vote in the United States soon, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, that will be. That's an important one.
I mean, you have to say politics is exciting now. It used to be pretty boring, right? You just go to the Pope's poll and just now we've
There's a
got
lot riding on it now.
lots going on, right? Lots going on. Thanks for joining everyone. And we are recording. So we've got Chris here, Dominic, you're here, Greg. Sounds like you're here, but I don't see you, and that's okay if you don't want to
Yep,
turn.
I am here.
Nice. And then Tana, Selena here from Switzerland. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, and I just talked to Christina. I don't know if she's going to join us or not, but she's off doing tons of stuff. And there's lots going on there. What I wanted to do this morning is just bring everyone up to speed on kind of what we're doing through the end of the year, and then take any questions, any suggestions, recommendations, make any adjustments, and kind of roll on. But it's been kind of a little bit quiet, but there has been some activity. So in terms of the film, it's been pretty active. We won the 2 awards and a selection in the Seattle Film Festival. We're a finalist in the Anatolia, which is in Istanbul. Also finalists at the Global Peace Film Festival. They said 6,000 people will see that film. They're just outside of Orlando, Florida. The Symbiotic Film Festival, we've been selected. Documentary Without Borders is no big deal. SOFA, we're a finalist. OCO International, we've been selected, and Dispatches of War selected. And September is a big month for festivals. So by the end of the month, we'll find out a bunch more. And then it kind of rolls into October, and then it slows down November, December. And then they'll be announcing awards for that, which will be fun. So, it's going okay. It's we didn't get into Toronto. We didn't get into Portland. But what I've heard is the normal is something like 13% of the films that you apply for festivals you'll get into. So we're doing better than that. So I like that. One of the things I would say the biggest thing that is a for sure is that the Washington State University, where I graduated from, Mark Dice, who followed me to Poland and did some time there and actually adopted a Ukrainian dog, is also a cougar, a Washington State cougar. But they're celebrating their 125th year of their veterinary college. And they've asked us to play our film at the main, it's called the Cub, before dinner. So, and there'll be over 500 veterinarians there and potential veterinarians watching the film and having dinner. And they want us to have a panel Adam from Humane Society International VP has agreed to come. And
Excellent.
then,
Dan,
yeah,
check with Adam when I met with him last week. I think that's up in the air whether he can or cannot make it
okay,
on other
okay,
things at HSI.
you got it. Thanks, Greg. I'll check with them.
Sure.
Yep. And then we're also waiting. We applied for a UK or US and a Canadian visa for Christina, so she may be able to come and participate in that.
Excellent.
So while we thought she was here, we thought we would do a couple other things. One of them is we did not get into the Vancouver Film Festival, but I used to be the chairman of the Vancouver International Mountain Film Festival, which actually is pretty freaking huge. You know, we have I think 20 or 30,000 people on our mail list and have watched our films. They're more, you know, wilderness and mountain film, skiing, snowing, mountaineering. But the head of that, Alan, who's Slovakian, has asked if we can show the movie and he'll market it for us in Vancouver. And I
Excellent.
asked the Canadian ambassador to Ukraine, and she said she would love to attend. So
Good.
the balancing point that we're at right now in Vancouver is when will the ambassador be here? Because she's come actually traveling through Vancouver to Victoria. So we're trying to catch her on that schedule. And October is the busiest time for whatever for these rentals of these theaters. So a lot of the theaters are booked that weekend, and it's Thanksgiving weekend in Canada. So we're trying to figure that out. So right, and it was even this morning we're juggling dates. But the great news is that she's been in touch with us about this. Alan's taking care of the logistics. We should be able to get a pretty big crowd in Vancouver, including the press and a big Ukrainian following. Plus, having the Canadian ambassador, she is trying to weave the Canadian angle, which is, hey, you got a guy that lives as a Canadian citizen. You've got most of the team is Canadian. The person that designed the poster is Ukrainian in Canada. And Canada sponsored our director writer, gave her a year free rent, and put her through film school. And she's winning awards. So that's a nice Canada story for the ambassador. And just speaking of that, the ambassadors, so she and I've been in touch also with the British ambassador and his wife, and they're all friends, Canadian ambassador and the British ambassador, and they're all willing to help us. So that's excellent. So I've also asked her how we can get a hold of the US ambassador. And I've got another friend, Lewis, who is kind of connected into the government of the US. So he is also going to try to connect to the US ambassador so that we can tie those things together. And I see that as a pretty big move. And the ask is, okay, ambassadors, you have these relationships with the Ukrainian government. Can you help us educate them on the challenge that they're facing that they may not even know about? And can they help us secure financing from the EU or the US or wherever they think we can get financing for this? So that's the ask. All right. So the plan for the rest of the year is to continue the film festivals. It's not a lot of work. Do a big thing around Washington State, get a lot of media. If Christina's in town or not, we want to be able to get on television in Seattle, in Spokane, get in the newspapers, get online about that. Possibly do a Vancouver showing. Tana and I have talked about doing another Seattle showing, and we'd love your opinion on that. We've had, 300 people to one. The other one we had about a dozen, but that was the night of the debate. And question is, can we pull enough of an audience to do it again? And then kind of the last thing around the film, there are two things around the film is, and the film is mostly to get public support. We use the ambassadors to get the government support, and then we do a direct appeal kind of directly to the EU. But for the film, a couple of things need to happen. One is If we don't get a distributor, and the way you get a distributor is AFM is coming up in Las Vegas in November. There are only 3 markets for buying films. Con is one, AFM is one. Can't remember the other one. So AFM is in November, and some folks that are friends with us have said that they will sponsor us and take us around and show us how to get bought down there by the AFM. and that's November. The other thought is there's a gentleman who's willing to put us up on this is what he does. He would put us up on Apple, Prime, YouTube, all the other platforms around the globe. And then we do a social media campaign to try to get people to see it if we can get purchased. So continue to market to the film festivals. We've applied to 47 different film festivals. That number is 13% for acceptance. I'm seeing that now. So by the middle of December, we want to double the industry standard. If we can get into 25% of the film festivals, I think that would be amazing. We've also adjusted our Google AdWords so they promote War Tales to the festivals. So for example, in San Diego, when that festival is coming up, our AdWords turn on and hit anyone that's going to the film festival and promote War Tales, and also to their judges. Possibly sometime in October, a showing in Vancouver, also in Edmonds or in Seattle. We've talked about maybe going to Ballard or maybe downtown Seattle or Capitol Hill. We do have for sure that big screening October 4th in Pullman at Washington State University with a panel with the dean. By the middle of or end of November, we'd love to be up on all the social platforms, streaming platforms, Apple, Prime, YouTube, around the world, and possibly attend the AFM market if we don't get purchased. The idea with the film festivals is you got to get those laurels, and the more laurels you have on your poster, that's when the buyers pay attention. And then just attend the film festivals if we think there are buyers there. So that is the thoughts for the rest of the year. We haven't really been promoting anything. We've not been doing any posting. We've not been asking for donations. However, we did file our annual report for Washington State, so that was required. We also got registered with their charities. So we're now an official charity through Washington State. That was another step that had to be taken. But beyond that, we're just continuing to fund Christina's efforts with the missions. We've got a problem with our van got confiscated at the border. And so we've been communicating to the border guards and trying to get our van back. Something to do with import export. It's a UK van and it's not registered in Ukraine. So we're working through that. It's quite a difficult process, but Christina's mom's been helping me. And we've noticed a huge slowdown because, the attention's on the election right now and on Gaza. There is, a little bit of renewed Ukrainian interest, but we've not seen anything in donations. So we did get a nice check the other day from one of Lewis's friends, but that's been it. So that's kind of where we are today. Any thoughts or questions or comments?
Yeah, I have something, Dan.
Of course.
I was talking to some old contacts from my FEI times, and they suggested to maybe shift the focus on saving children from rabies and do a fundraiser with World Vision. And also Just Giving, which the FEI apparently have worked with a lot. So World Vision and Just Giving. And I teach IT, have been doing for about 20 years, and I've got a lot of streamers who use Twitch. And they told me that back in November 21, the streaming platform Twitch made a animal category. so people can stream. So if they've got like a dog that's had puppies, or if they're feeding animals or something, they have a fixed camera, they can live stream. And through the Twitch app, you can also live stream on your phone. So I was just thinking, if I know Ali is going to be, he's a tech guy engineer, he's going to be in Christina's place at the end of October. If she would be open to that, maybe you could do something, or she could do something with Twitch.
Oh, Selena, I love your ideas. So a couple things. You're right, Hallie could help us with that. Maybe we set up a camera at the shelter so they can watch the dogs, and because they're all socialized in that pen, which is fun. And I remember,
Exactly.
Tina, for some reason, someone put something up on Twitch a couple of years ago, and our donations went nuts. And we
Yeah.
were like, what the heck happened? And I didn't even know what Twitch was. The last thing about that, if you remind me, Selena, one of the vice presidents for World Vision lives in
Mhm.
the building behind me.
Yeah.
And World Vision is headquartered in Seattle,
Yeah.
Federal Way. So I'm sure Tana and I can reach out to some folks there at Tony, and I can reach out to this guy behind us. We're doing a barbecue on the 22nd, so we're having a barbecue bake-off, and we're having a judge come in from a chef to determine whose
Okay.
barbecue is best. So I'll
Okay. Well,
talk to him then.
it's been about 30 years since I was there. I was working for the Canadian Olympic team at the time, and I do remember World Vision being mentioned, but
Very
obviously the people there who were in charge of probably long gone, because
Yeah,
it
no,
was
they're
quite a
huge.
while ago.
Yeah, please remind me with a message, and I will go after my neighbor and find out how to do this.
Yeah,
And then
but
we'll
the
talk to
focus
Ollie
is
about the this live stream as well, the Twitch
Yeah, and
account.
the focus is children and rabies. Like on
Mm.
the Charles Ruprecht interview, he says that the number one victims of bites and rabies infections are
Yeah,
children.
that's
And I
right.
think that's what was suggested to me by my old contacts, FEI contacts, that going the children route would be the way to go.
Very cool.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that could be quite an
Hey.
interesting one. Just a bit more from my side. We obviously has had a separate call with some of the people on this call in the last few weeks, Dan, just talking about what we could do in terms of engaging with governments and how we might be able to get the bigger NGOs, the animal welfare NGOs, involved in supporting what we're seeking to do. I have spoken over the last few days to the UK director of Four Paws, which is a Vienna-based charity. And she's going out to her board meeting at Four Paws, and she is interested, and she thinks the board will be interested in doing something on Ukraine. I've sold her on the idea that Four Paws could get sort of first option of getting involved and giving support, because they're a Central European charity. In Vienna, they're in the right place, and I think they've got more overall activity in Ukraine across a
Yeah.
wide range of areas, from dogs to wild animals, than most other charities on the ground. She says, interestingly enough, that they've got more money than can actually spend, because they've had quite a lot of donations over the few years, and it's ring fence, and they just don't have the capacity to spend everything they've got in Ukraine. But what that does open up an opportunity for us is we've talked about hosting a conference in Ukraine on this issue.
Mhm.
And, I think what we might be in a position, this is what I want to pitch to her board in Vienna in 2 weeks' time, is that actually if Four Paws would come forward and use some of the funds they have to help us host a conference, we'd give them all the credibility as being a key partner in that, having, people on the ground, having the capability. But I also think, there's an interest, if we could get government funding, that they could tool up and they could become a key delivery arm.
Oh, yeah.
Having quite a lot of Ukrainian presence already, a good track record of work in the country, having
Yeah.
their sort of center of operations in Vienna because they're in the region. So, unlike, HSI and other charities that are not, I just think it fits, and it fits well with
Well,
the
that's
way they
good, because
work.
I worked with Four Paws for a couple of years with a gal out of Vienna, and did not have much success. So yeah, I need your skills to help bring that forward. And part of the problem was they had invested a lot in UPA, And what we had done was shown UPA our technology, and they said, "Yeah, I wish
Yeah.
we would seen that before we built our own."
Okay.
So they were kind of destined down that road. But yeah, Four Paws has been in the country for a long time,
Yeah.
and they're very reputable. So we'll
Yeah.
need your skills to be able to
Well,
maneuver.
Sonal's really good. You know, she's the UK director, but she's clever and she's ambitious. You could see there would be benefits if she was championing some of this. You know, we just had some awards in Parliament that I ran this week for various politicians, and she was she got involved as one of the category award judges and things. So we have a good working relationship. I think what I need is I've got the sort of key point overview that, you know, of why we need to take action. I need some more work on those figures of what we think we need in terms of the 25 million euros,
Okay.
whatever it is we've been talking about. Now, I know you've broken that down a bit, but I need that. What I need to do is to give them an idea of what we're pitching for and how it would then break down in terms of what we would use. And then we could say, listen, this is what we want to go to the international community to get access to these level of funds. But then we'll need an NGO on the ground to help us deliver this activity. And I think that's where we could get their board to go, you know what, that would be a really good project for us to be involved with, that we could get first in there. And then we can make the case that they could release some of the ring fence funds they've got to actually help us host an event in Kiev, which is what because I think we keep coming back to that. And I fully agree with you. We need the Canadian, British and American ambassadors on board. But if we've got those three on board, those three present with the Ukrainian government, with Four Paws, with the right people on the ground, we could host the type of event we need to in the Ukrainian capital that would put this on the international map. That this would effectively be a sort of donor conference, really, that would, you know, bring focus to what we've got. The film would be the backdrop that started the story, so everything we're doing with the film festivals works really well. But that's where I see this heading, if we can get that right.
That is very cool.
The timing, early New Year with the new president in the White House. Hopefully, it won't be Trump. But you know, where we've got an administration that looks positively at the need to continue to support Ukraine.
Could I?
Sorry, could I just say something to Dominic quickly about Four Paws? I volunteered in the 90s in Austria when I lived there, and also in Switzerland since I lived here. And I'm also fluent in High German, Austrian dialect from Vienna, Niederösterreich, and Swiss German. And I've still got some contacts here in Switzerland with with Four Paws. So there's maybe an opportunity as well there. I'd have to check if the old guys are still around though.
Okay. And it might well be because of where you're located. If we needed someone to go to a meeting and discuss and present some of this, you could actually help us do that in the sense that you're in the you're in the region.
I can do it. I can do it. I can do it online. I can't travel, unfortunately.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Fine.
Well, Selena, the other way you can help us is we tried to get the original 15 million from HSI, and we put together a 26-page report that they required with lots of facts and figures and budgets and how this thing would roll out. So maybe we can update that for Four Paws.
If you that would be really helpful if you've got that. If we can get that off the shelf, just sit down. That's the type of document we need to get before their board.
Let me get it to Selena first, and then we'll both send a draft over to you.
If you can, yeah, because you know, I could really do with getting that to Sonal, the UK director, by the end of next week. That's my timeline. So just to get your guys to get
Dan,
yeah,
just to make sure that we're all on the same page, when you're doing that, let's coordinate, because I have reached out to HSI. I met with Adam Parascandola last week, told him, you know, he's seen the process. He pointed me to a person named Catherine. He's going to make an introduction. She is the one at HSI who works, you know, with the folks in Ukraine. The steps that I'm taking right now with her, the next steps, will be to identify who the veterinarians are, where the clinics are, start putting all of those pieces into place. If we don't have that, and we have a donor and says, how are you going to do this? And we don't have an answer down to a low level of detail, they're going to be questioning, you know, making a donation to us to do this. Now, it's been, you know, I don't remember, Dan, when we first met. It's been almost a year. The number I just heard, 25, I think it's probably more accurate, 40 million US, if we're looking at addressing the population that we need because of the growth that we've seen over the last number of months. So I'm thinking, for those of you who don't know, I'm a program manager at Boeing, and we need to get the details on this, and that's what I'm focusing on. I appreciate your reaching out, doing the media, getting to the politicians, getting the message out there that we've got a catastrophe looming. They need to get on it and get on it now. So that's kind of where my focus is. But as far as that plan, Dan, circling back to what I first said, let's make sure we're on the same page so we don't have any miscommunication to anyone. And Dominic, as far as forepaws, it doesn't necessarily need to be HSI. Let's explore both of them and see which one can affect the change that we need, and start working in Ukraine as quickly as possible once we get the funding. Final point, when I talked to Adam, I said, we are not going to throw this over the fence, you or whoever. We're putting together the plan. I'm going to reach out. Who are the veterinarians? Where are the clinics? How is this going to work? Dan, you mentioned warehouses. We need to validate that they can scale up to the levels that we're talking about. And I would think 150 to maybe 170,000 a year if we're going to stamp down that growth pattern. So just some thoughts here, but that's what I'm working on. And
Thanks,
we
Greg.
really need to have that, that information for a potential donor.
And Greg, do you mind sending any of your materials also to Selena so we can assemble kind of what we have in a warehouse, our own data warehouse, and we can pull that together. And
yeah,
Dominic, also the lady that I was working with out of Vienna was Manuela. I don't know if you know her from Forepaws.
No,
okay,
sorry.
Manuela Rawlings.
I think the key for me, and Greg's absolutely right. I think we need to keep the doors open to both HSI and Forepaws, and there's no reason why we couldn't have two partner organizations coming together. But ultimately, we've got to try and get in front of the decision makers in those organizations and have something that interests them, that they could see the benefit of putting some of their resource into this and getting behind it. And if we're going to do anything in the capital of Ukraine, and I think we have to, because you keep coming back to the fact you need to put this on the map politically with the Ukrainian government, with donor nations.
Yes.
And we've got to host something at some point that draws attention to the growing crisis. And it needs to be bringing together people that could be on the ground to do the work of dealing with it, and some of the international NGOs that would play a key part in that process of delivery. And have support from the Ukrainian government as well.
And hey, Dominic, a key point, Dominic, is when I spoke with Adam, I said, we're not coming to you saying, do you have the funds? We're coming to you with two things. One is how this is going to work and some pre-work. So literally all they need to do is maybe hire a person or two to coordinate all this. The second piece is the funding. So we're not saying, hey, we need you to provide that. We're coming to you, but we need either one of those orgs to be the coordinator of this entire effort, scaling up to, call it 170,000 a year.
Yeah. And the key, I think we talked about this before, Greg, if we did that, we'd want to make it a restrictive fund, which means if we raise this money for them, I don't want it to go into their board meeting. No,
I agree with you. So it's all got to be ring fence. And I think, interestingly enough, learning from what I have from where Four Paws, as I said earlier on, if they do have funds that they can't all use because it's ring fenced under their budgeting, as it would be within charity. I can imagine that maybe HSI might have the same problem. They might well have more money than they can spend in Ukraine.
They don't. I asked them about this. And
all right. Well, that's where maybe the difference is, and that's where maybe Four Paws might have an additional benefit.
If I may, I think that what Dominic and I, Greg and Pam, who's with it, have kind of discussed is this idea that this could be, if you're involving ambassadors to Ukraine, and this is becoming a political issue, then all of these nations are donating, rather large amounts of money to the Ukraine fight. And so if any of this money could be earmarked for, our animal welfare issue, which is pretty extreme, then it would be pennies compared to what's being, fought with tanks and aircraft and everything else, right? So if you could earmark that money and then turn to an NGO that's interested in doing something and have them be the recipients of that money, then it would be a win-win. But at the end of the day, I think when we've had our discussions, Dan and all, it's all been about this is a Ukraine problem. Ukraine has to be invested in the solution. And right now, it feels like there are plenty of Ukrainians who are invested in the solution, but they're not in the political circles. So, so at the end of the day, there has to be some sort of pressure on the international level from the international diplomatic community on Ukraine to find a solution and then present with them with options in terms of how to make it happen with the money from those nations that are now earmarked to do that.
Perfect.
Yeah, which I think is critical. What we could do if we had an event of some kind in the capital that would really bring all that together, where you would sort of assess the problem, key elements of delivery, the amount of money it's required, who could actually do the work on the ground, and what would then be required of donor governments, the sort of percentages which would be tiny, representing, the big, massive aid budgets they're putting for military purposes into the country. So you're right. But I suppose ultimately we do need those friends in the Ukrainian government who can say, actually, yeah, okay, we accept there's a need for this. The other thing that we talked about, of course, is all the bad PR that Erdogan and his government in Turkey are under because of the dog killing they're doing, which has, got global attention and potentially could be quite damaging to their tourist industry as well. So in some ways that does give us leverage. We do need to be putting the word out that Ukraine doesn't want to find itself in the same position. If Zelensky starts killing dogs on the scale that we're seeing in Turkey, then he could see a similar negative, global reaction, and that could be very damaging to Ukraine at a critical time. People might say it's only dogs, but it sets a broader public opinion, kickback that could hurt them, and that can feed down to politics as well, particularly in the volatility of the American political system at the moment. So,
absolutely.
Dominic,
yeah,
what do you think the timing would be on a culling of the animals there? Prior to the end of the war or after?
I really don't know. I don't know how the Ukrainian government would go about this, and depending others here on this call might have an idea of what they might be forced to do. Celine.
They already tried. They already tried in the first year, at the end of the first year. And there was a lot of uproar. Mark Randall, I think, from Nature Watch was involved. I know I got a lot of information from him and his connection to the HAU and the AZOU with the lawyer Marina, who's in charge of that, or who takes the lead on most things. And they did actually draft a bill to allow that, and then there was this big uproar, and then it got knocked down again. So they have already tried in the last couple of years.
Yeah, because Selena, my concern is if it's prior to the end of the war and public opinion worldwide goes south on Ukraine, then it's now advantage Putin. And we can't afford that. We've got a number of different things going on here. And in a meeting that I had with Dominic, Chris, and I think Pam was on that, I've got a classmate His name is Frank McKenzie, General. He was the commander of Central Command. Although that is not, Ukraine is not in the CENTCOM area, he's got contacts. And what I was going to ask him is, what is the impact if things went south, if they did a mass culling and Ukraine had negative, perception from the world? What military impact might that have? Is my concern valid or is it not? So that's, I'm reaching out to him to get a professional's opinion.
Hey, Greg, when do you think you'll hear back from him?
I'm going to try to get something in the next week or two. After he retired, he's fairly busy. I know he's got an organization that he's running. So,
yeah, my advice is to get to before the holidays all kick in and everyone checks
yeah,
out. You gotta get
absolutely.
But
that's my concern.
It's a valid concern. I think it's also what Russia chooses to do, and how it uses it as a sort of, a campaign, a propaganda campaign. So if Ukraine starts killing large numbers of dogs, the Russians will go to town with a propaganda campaign on social media, fed into all the including right-wing American, journalists and people, in your sphere of influence that will quite happily take the stories that, here's Zelensky again. He's a dog-killing, corrupt leader. He can't be trusting these people or anything else, and they'll run it for all it's worth.
I want to throw something out there that's really crazy, and just because I know it's crazy, and I'm on good drugs, so I think lots of good crazy stuff. Okay, so we know that Ukraine has moved into Russian territory and taken a big swath of that. And the same problem that's happened in Ukraine is happening now in Russia with the animals. So as an organization, I know our Ukraine isn't our name, but do we care about going into Russia and helping rescue dogs and cats in Russia that are suffering as well?
It's a good point. And if dogs are being killed as a result of military action and what's going on, how do people react to that? It's a whole new front on this.
Yeah, I'm just worried that, well, I mean, I don't disagree it would be a worthy cause. I'm just not sure. Right now this is a low blip on the radar from anybody over there. Like we all, there are a lot of people that care about this, but nobody in political circles potentially. I think the moment that we put it on the radar, then it does become something they care about. And I just don't know with Russia how, they've just got this tremendous information warfare capability.
Yes. Yeah.
That I'm worried that, I mean, they're really good at it, and I'm worried that if it became a thing where it's now it's in their not their backyard, it's in their yard, it's in their garden, then now all of a sudden it's something that they would care about and throw energy behind. And I don't know if that's something that we would want to wake the bear on, quite literally. But
think about it, because you'd be in, Ukraine has taken over this territory, and it shows that Ukraine cares not only about people and kids, but also about animals, and that, we're going to take care of their animals over there and not, so I don't know. It's a wild idea.
Dan, it is a great idea. I just think that if we did that, just from an information, from a strategic communications perspective, if we do that, they absolutely have to be doing something in Ukraine too. So then, they can't be doing something in Russia and not doing something in Ukraine. So I think then it circles back to Ukraine's got to, like, their government's they've got to embrace this whole thing. Otherwise, if they don't, then it's a lot of private citizens that care about this, but it's not a public. It's not.
There's also a lot of political change in Ukraine coming, isn't there? There's going to be a new foreign minister appointed.
Yeah.
And they've sacked their head of the Air Force. So there's a lot of problems Zelensky has in his government at the moment. But having said that, whoever they appoint as a new foreign minister, maybe that's the time that we go to them and go, "Here you are. This is a hot potato that you've got on your plate. Have you thought about this one?
Yeah.
You might be close to butchering 500,000 dogs, and look what's happening in Turkey. Do you want that on your plate too?"
I feel like that it's that conversation, Dominic, that we've got to have, and it's got to be with somebody very senior in the Zelensky administration.
I think
is a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And the way I see it from my government days, one way of doing this through the ambassadors is we need some, official ambassadorial telegrams going back to their government saying that, we're watching events in Turkey. Clearly, this could happen here in Ukraine, and we need to think about what the global consequences would be for the reputation of Ukraine and for people's sympathy for Ukraine if we start seeing the sort of kickback that we're seeing in Turkey about them butchering large numbers of dogs. And that's the message. If we can get the diplomats putting that in to the system, saying, and if they really zoom in on what's happening in Turkey, then that could help us. It's getting that leverage on you. Yes,
well, we got to do it.
So
before
I think the British ambassador will know very well, because all he has to do is consult his colleagues in Ankara, will go, yeah, it's a bloody mess over here. This has gone crazy. There was 20,000 people in Istanbul on a protest on Sunday. So we're getting large numbers of people there. It's going to the Supreme Court, global tourism, lots of coverage around the world. So, they just need to consult their colleagues in Turkey, and they'll come back and go, yeah, actually, you're right. Killing dogs is actually really unpopular, and it's not going to paint a good view of a nation. And then suddenly that comes back into the Ukraine frame. And we need to plant that in the seeds of some of our media colleagues and journalists and say, ooh, could Ukraine face a similar problem? So it's a bit of a tactical game, but the more that we can get that out there, the more that, slightly the Ukrainian government goes, shit, yeah, okay, right, we've got to sort this out. What do we do? What do we do? And that's when we come in with our offer of assistance.
The good news is Ukraine is familiar with this, as Selena said. There was another calling before a sports event in Ukraine, and it caused a huge backlash. So they're used to this, but this is on a bigger scale than Turkey.
Yeah, exactly. So at a critical time when the country's internal political system is coming under real pressure, when Zelensky's under more pressure than he's ever been.
Yeah.
When you've got potentially a new president being elected who'd like to pull the plug on the whole bloody thing. So it's a very tenuous time for them. So we've got to somehow find a way through it. Obviously the other thing I mentioned in going back and forth was where we were with the Harris campaign, and as to whether we could plug something in. I fully understand as people have come back saying it just is not possible for us to engage with them. But I do think we need to keep that open if anything's happening, because, in my view, the Ukraine issue is going to become more of a defining issue of difference between Harris and Trump as you run into November. There's no question about it. That and abortion are going to be the two issues, one domestic, one foreign policy, that are going to, really draw people into the different camps.
And Gaza.
Gaza to a degree. I think Gaza, but not on the scale. I think Ukraine more likely, because there's quite a lot of people that might sympathize with Trump will go, actually, I'm just uncomfortable with his policy on Ukraine and that security policy. I'd rather stick with, what Harris and Biden have done. So on Gaza, well, it's more split, maybe. But it's there. But I agree, so it's, the issue for me is at some point, you could see some real benefits. Dogs do matter in American elections. I know I've shared some of this stuff around.
Oh, yeah.
But they do. There are tens of millions of dog owners, and they vote, and they care about animals. And actually quite a lot of towards right-leaning voters have dogs. If you want to wean them off, then, coming up with something like this as part of a security animal welfare policy could actually be quite popular. And that's all. God knows, you've got 7 states and you've got probably 20, 30,000 people that might decide that election. That's how tight it will be. God knows how many dog owners could decide it. So, if I was someone in the Harris campaign, I'd want to be looking at something like this going, actually, are there some dog votes for us to get on this one? If we're giving a massive amount of money to Ukraine, and that's controversial, for some people are very controversial, what if we said some of that was actually going to help some dogs? How would that fly? They can do their,
Dominic, let's do your conversation just a little bit. It's in the Harris organization, in the American politics, it's now more about cats.
Well, I know about well, I'm just doing an interview on television here in a few hours about the Pope going on that they should have kids and not pets. So that's becoming a raging issue today. He's in Indonesia saying that everyone should continue to have children and not have pets. So I'm saying basically there's too many people in the world, so just stick to your pets. The more pets, the better, actually. And we're heading for 9 billion. We can't go. So so that's a big issue of debate for me today in some of my work. But going back to where we are, but I do think there's some good stuff in there. Actually, that would not hurt the Harris campaign by being involved in some shape or form. So, for example, if we were planning a conference of some kind, if we were pulling together the international community, it would be good for them to say, actually, we support this as part of our broader humanitarian animal welfare efforts, alongside all the money we're plowing in. because I don't think anyone in America largely would object to that unless they really hate Ukraine full stop and don't want a penny to be
Hey,
spent.
Dan, I wanted to go back and ask you a couple of baseline questions, if I could.
Sure.
If
Good,
the
Tony.
government of Ukraine has engaged in a culling effort of some kind, or even in Turkey, can we obtain the data by which they decided to make that move and any history of that move? I mean, they
Yeah.
wouldn't just, subjectively say, hey, we should go kill some animals. They obviously would have data that would show the severity of the issue. And is it possible, other than trying to go through ambassadorial channels, to get that information? The second thing I wanted to mention is, in a really fun, sort of looking back and just sort of questioning how we're trying to get to NGOs, for example. If you're looking at an NGO, do you have an understanding of what their incremental strategic plan is, say, for the coming year, and whether or not this program plugs directly into any of those plans for the coming year? Because otherwise and I don't mean this in a critical way, but otherwise we're spinning our wheels. These organizations have limited resources, even the multi-million-dollar ones, and they're going to make sure any programmatic activity plugs into an existing program or planned program that they have. So if we're not looking at the strategic plan for the Humane Society International, for example, we're missing an opportunity to better communicate our message.
Good thought. Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Well, I would say on
Tony,
that, Tony, from the Four Paws side is, that's something I was looking at, and that's why I've been speaking to them about it. It's clear that they have a strategic plan of activity globally, but they put quite a lot of effort and they have a long history in Ukraine. But what they're finding is difficult for them to spend the money they've raised because there's only so much they can do and what they can do on the ground. I think we are pushing at potentially an open door with them because of their track record, because of their location. They're going through a restructuring at the moment in terms of their plan and finances and priorities as an organization. That's currently underway as we speak. But I do think this as a 2025 area of work definitely could fit with them. So I think that I can't, guarantee it, but I do think there is a sympathetic ear there. I don't know about HSI. I think HSI has had less involvement there to a large degree, has bigger global commitments in other places. So we might find it's a little bit more of a tough sell with them, but I do think Four Paws potentially this could work for them.
Back to your first point too, we know our first question. I've seen the press about what happened and why they made the decision on the culling and what the result was, but not the internal government workings. And I think getting into places like Ukrainian government, they don't have those records. Where the U.S. probably has 14 million pages on it, whatever every move they make. You try to get data from Ukraine, it's just pulling teeth. There is no data, but there is the results, and there's some pretty good articles about the culling and what the results were. So in Ukraine specifically, and certainly in Turkey and some of the other ones. And we did a report on culling, I believe. Celine, I'm trying to remember. We put together a list of the major cullings around the world and when it was, what happened, and kind of why they did it. Nothing to this scale. I mean, nothing to this scale.
No, Turkey is on a scale very large because, and this has been a debate raging in Turkey for many years. They've had animal welfare legislation, which was, dated and strengthened about 2 years ago. And the idea being that, they needed to reduce the number of dogs that they had on the streets of Turkish towns and cities. But there's a difficulty there because, they are in many ways part of the culture, part of the history, particularly in big cities like Istanbul. And communities have generally looked after these animals and often contributed not just to food costs, but to veterinary support as well. And they've been, two documentaries about the cats and dogs that have been very successful at international film festivals on those animals.
Even
in the Ottoman times, they emptied all the dogs of Istanbul, put them on an island, off in the Bosphorus, and then they all sort of fought with each other, and the screaming of the dogs overnight was heard throughout the city, and that was a sort of testament of not doing what should have been done. So it sort of hangs around in the modern Turkish state. But what Erdogan has done is decided to push ahead on the basis that there's it's almost a political fight he's chosen between the more religious, conservative base of his support and the secular. Particularly the opposition parties are now run many towns and cities in Turkey. So he's almost, he's using this as a battering ram to put them on the defensive. You've also got those ongoing debates as you have in every country about how many people have actually died as a result of street dogs. In
Yeah,
Turkey,
of
it's not
course.
clear. Some people have, and they've been attacked. But then lots of people get knocked over because, like any Turkey's a bloody dangerous place to cross the road. And some people are saying it was the dogs that forced me into the road, so that's why they got knocked over. So we must kill the dogs. So you've got all of this type of issue. And the other thing is that they've not been able to put in place the structure to deal with the problem. They don't have enough shelters. They don't have enough vets. They can't euthanize the animals. The shelters they have are appalling. And so you're bringing animals into places where there's no proper protection for them. And then there's also huge amounts of corruption where people take the law into their own hands and poison, kill, shoot, and do the most horrible things. The one thing we do know from Turkey is all of that's captured on social media, and then it's shared around the world. And that's what's going to happen in Ukraine as well.
Yeah.
And there are dark forces. There's a lot of anti-Turkish forces, to be fair, that are using the dog situation to, to push their agenda too. It might be about Armenia or Greece and all the other things we're familiar with, where there's friction and historical problems. So it does give you an idea of what the Russians might do with it. If
Oh,
they
the
can
Russians,
push that sort of agenda.
and like
And
Chris
it could be
said, the
very
Russians are
damaging.
good. I'm sorry, I got to interrupt, and then I've got to leave here in a few minutes. But I've got to ask another question. So Kurilla was the main cinematographer for us and one of our biggest volunteers. He's Ukrainian. He's from Kyiv. He's Alexander Shupka's son, the lead vet over there that works as a professor and is also the president of one of the vet associations that Greg, you and I have talked about. So, anyways, Kurilla is in vet school. He's also went to London to study cinematography, and he did most of the video work. He has volunteered for the Ukrainian army, and I was talking to him yesterday. He's in training camp. So he was showing me pictures of him shooting mortars, like those helicopter things and guns. And anyways, so I was talking to him, and in Ukraine, they give them ammo and weapons, but they don't give them armor. So he's had some friends buy him some body armor, so that's kind of taken care of. But there's a few other things that he needs, and he's given me some links to the website in Ukraine, and then we could use Nova Posta to deliver to him. It would be a couple $1,000s. So I'm either thinking about running a little campaign for him and building a little kind of mission around. Here's our cinematographer. He's volunteered for the Ukrainian army. He needs these things. Would you mind donating? And kind of a wish list. Is everyone okay with that, or do we have a?
Absolutely.
Dan, if you're going to do that, doing it right now is a good idea because everybody is rage donating. So either for drones or armor, especially since that entire family was wiped out apart from the father. That's really kicked things off. So I've got a list of about 4,000 people, and I just see the trend has gone into rage donating in the last few days.
Well, I'll put
So
together
now's the time to do that.
A small campaign for him, and he doesn't need a lot. He got most of his stuff, but I'm really good friends with him. He's one of the most amazing guys on the planet.
That sounds really worthwhile, Dan. A question I have is any fundraising you do for that, which I think is great. Let me know where I can send my check. But that's the question: are you doing this through the nonprofit or just on the side?
I think you can click on the link and just pay the website directly, and it'll Nova post it to him, so it doesn't have to go through our.
Better to
it's
not
more
put
just
it,
using
better
our
to not put it
using
through
our
the nonprofit.
visibility. Yeah.
Do it.
And
separate.
we promote other, like Christina's doing some work for a German organization. I've been promoting them. You can donate the money there, donate it directly to her. I don't care, but as long as it gets done.
Yeah.
So
Is that the Tiernothelfer Ukraine?
Sorry, that?
Is that the Tiernothelfer Ukraine, the one that's got like a cartoony flag?
Oh, that she's working for right now, you mean?
Yeah, the one that you donated money to, you just said. Is that Tiernothelfer Ukraine?
No. And I didn't donate money to them. I'm just pushing or promoting their organizations. When any good organization that's doing work there, I'll promote. In the old days, it was like, no, you got to donate to me, and then I'll decide. It's kind of like, nah, it's just, if you feel like it, go donate. If you want to support them, go support them.
Okay, I just have a question. Right back to the beginning, what Greg said about the vets, and I didn't quite get, I didn't quite understand what was meant.
Oh, I think
What details do you need about the vets? Because I've obviously got all of them memorized, where they are, who they are, what their specialist area is, reptiles, horses,
Oh,
small animals.
wonderful.
That's all in my brain. So what if you tell
Selena,
me what you need.
let me
Yes.
reach out to you offline.
Okay.
Let's talk about that. My idea there, and Tony, this gets back to a point that you just made about the strategic plan for the organizations. My idea was to make, kind of the easy button. If we do identify who the vets are, identify how this works, validate the warehouses where the supplies are coming from. Do they have the capacity over X number of years, that many animals per year? Do that work? And I'll get a copy of their strategic plans. But the idea I had with Adam was you're already doing something. HSI is already doing work. What we're doing is coming in, asking them as the large organization, can you add a person or two to coordinate this? But we bring how it's going to work. We bring who we need to coordinate with and all of the logistics and the money. To your point, Dan, that money is earmarked only for the work that we're doing.
Yeah. And Greg, let me just interrupt. So the other thing is
Sure.
in Ukraine, there are two vet associations, USVNA, which is a small vet association run by this one gentleman. I can't remember his name, but I've had discussions with him. And then the other one is just the General Vet Association run by Dr. Shupka, Alexander Shupka, Kurilla's dad. And so the best, at least I think, you could go to each vet and try to coordinate this, or you could try to coordinate it through the associations and leverage the kind of scale. And then also you need to have training in Ukrainian and certifications and make
Yes.
sure that they're going to fill out the paper, we've built a mobile app for them that they can use. All those things just, have to be followed through. We need photos of the animals and passports and the microchips to record that the work has been done and that we can pay them. So
Right.
I think
And
that's the important part. But to make it scalable and leverageable is important. But
yeah,
gentlemen,
and Dan,
please, I'm sorry, but it's almost 9 o'clock and I gotta get to an appointment.
okay, just real
But
quick, what you just said is all in that process. From the donation, how you validate who does what work, etc.
you got it.
And
Perfect.
Greg, is everybody then aware of the extremely detailed and complicated system that each individual veterinary has in order to be paid, and if they are allowed to be paid by an organization? It's pretty complicated.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
We have not communicated that out yet. So let me start. Step one, Selena, is to get with you. Let's identify who they are.
Yep.
And start putting that piece together. There's a lot of other pieces. You're right. The education, the training, all of that has to come together. But we've got to have that comprehensive picture, how this works, how all the pieces integrate. If we're going to ask somebody to donate, call it $40 million, they're going to want to know, how is this going to work? Are they going to know that it's going to, the right people and they are getting the work done that is expected to be complete.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of homework here.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, and we don't have much time. So I
Right.
do think I've got a template also on the budget, which we could,
What I
set
need
up
is something
break-
it's
kind
a
of
top
breakdown.
line sort of document that we could get as an exec summary of our plan of action and some of the structure that we're talking about that would lay it out that we could put before a board meeting of 4 cores to get them to look at it and go, yeah, okay, they'll want more if they pick it up, but we've got to get something in front of them.
Okay.
So
Hey,
if you could get that to me by the end of next week.
Dominic, I've got a
Yeah.
flow chart that I was just describing. Let me send that to you.
Thank
That
you.
will at least give you a comprehensive look at what what we're thinking here.
Thank you.
as far
Thank
as
you.
the
And I think it just
entire
gets some of
system.
those sort of broad figures. If we put them into HSI, then let's give us something that we can work on.
Okay, when we hang up here, I will send that.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Dan.
folks. And when this recording is done, I'll get it downloaded and send it out. Appreciate all your help, and let's move this thing forward.
Okay. Take care, my friend. It's good to see you.
Thanks.
I know you're under.
Cheers.
Thank you. Take care.
Sure.
Bye-bye.